Hi there. So thank you, Jad. Thank you, Jacob. My name is Emily Basaga Dunn, and I am part of the Premium Support Specialist team here at Autodesk with a specialty in generative design and BIM. Perfect. Okay. So what is Dynamo? This is a visual programming tool, and this will allow users to automate and streamline aspects of the design process. Why should you use Dynamo? Well, using Dynamo can help increase efficiency, and this will allow your office the ability to reduce time spent on tedious tasks, allow your staff to do more in less time. This will also provide more options for the client, fostering a better relationship and setting you apart from the competition. You'll also be able to perform tasks native Revit is not able to perform, and you'll also be provided with a competitive edge over your competition. So this is a lot of words on the slide. We're not going to go through every single one. The reason we have this slide in the presentation is just to be able to show you at a very high level what a quick start guide could look like. There are flexibility in these steps. And the reason we're showing this is just there's a lot to go through if you're getting into Dynamo from an installation end, and we want you to understand the big picture here before we get into all of the details of the presentation. So where do you get Dynamo, and which type of Dynamo do your users need? When you visit the download section of dynamobim.org, there's two basic Dynamo downloads. There's Dynamo, which you can see to the left here, including both Dynamo Core, Dynamo for Revit, and Dynamo Player. And there's also Dynamo Studio that you're seeing to the right, which is including Studio and Core. So for both types of Dynamo, Dynamo Core is the base software, which all the other versions are required to run. It's open source and can be utilized for geometry creation, data management and alterations, and this can access many other software platforms, not Revit, via their API. Just as a note, you really can't install Dynamo unless Revit's on the system. So as we pointed out in the You Are Here slide, make sure you're working in Revit. Dynamo for Revit expands Dynamo Core to allow for creating general activities interacting with a Revit model. Dynamo Studio expands on Dynamo Core to allow for the use of a web interface, to allow for customization of outputs from any web-connected device, and allows for a large-scale option generation via the portal to Project Fractal. So we're just going to take a quick look at Dynamo, otherwise known as Core or Sandbox. When and why would you use Dynamo Core Sandbox? Well, we would say this is for graph script developers and end users who need to work with files on tasks that are not directly tied to a Revit model or environment. For example, in the CA phase of a project, a user may need to produce a field report document prior to each site visit, which they can then fill out on site. Dynamo can be used to create the file, generate the report number, fill in the dates, pull expected progress from other sources, pull action items for follow-up out of the previous report, access the web to get the current weather conditions at the site, and then save the file to the network for use. Just so that you have a sense of what Dynamo Core Sandbox looks like in terms of the UI, here it is. If you want to run this and you're in a Windows 10 environment, you generally go to your search tab, search Dynamo, and then select Dynamo plus the correct version of the desktop app to launch. The version being shown here is 0.9.1. Dynamo Core Sandbox does run independently from Revit as a standalone application, as shown. There's also Dynamo for Revit. So when and why would you use this? Well, if you are a graph or script developer who's looking to utilize Dynamo to manipulate Revit models with your work, you would definitely want to use this. A good example is if you're doing a topograph attached to a wall, Dynamo can read the image and translate this to a wall based on brightness and will convert to a family based on a wall-based hosting. An example of built-in Revit that allows for iteration in minutes. So here are some installation details for Dynamo for Revit user interface. You can see that if you wanted to utilize this part of the Dynamo toolset, you'd launch Revit. And in this example, we are showing Revit 2017. Start a new project, and in this case, we're looking at an architectural project. And then from there, you're actually going to the Manage tab within Revit, and you're clicking on Dynamo to launch the Dynamo for Revit application. Make sure you're selecting the correct version that you'd like to launch. So now we'll focus for a moment on Dynamo Player for Revit and when and why you might use this. You can use the Dynamo Player to load scripts applicable to any project for users within your organization to quickly access and run. What does that look like in practice? Well, if you're already in the Revit environment, again, from the Manage tab, you can click on Revit Player, and from Dynamo Player, from there you're able to launch the Dynamo Player. You can see in this image there's the Dynamo Player with all of the play icons and the different scripts available for selection. Finally, there is Dynamo Studio. So when and why would you use Dynamo Studio? This is basically only when you need a send to web functionality. So this would be used by graph or script developers who want to show the resulting output of their work with users outside the office via the web interface and Project Fractal. An example for this is early in the design process, a client may want to be able to understand how applying a given use to various portions of their floor plates will impact their expected income to help ensure maximum return on investment. Utilizing the Send to Web feature of Dynamo Studio allows the design team to easily share a copy of the graph with the client to allow them to play with the various options, receiving accurate feedback for both geometric form and calculated values as each selection is made. So this further integrates the owner into the design process and helps the team make the right decision more quickly. Just to take a look at the Dynamo Studio UI, this is fairly similar to Dynamo Core Sandbox, which is some slight branding changes. And you can see that this also runs independently from Revit as a standalone application. So selecting your Dynamo versions. Which version should you install? Dynamo development does move at a different pace from Revit, and as such, versions and release dates don't generally align between the products. So this unsynchronized release schedule can cause issues for users if it's not correctly managed, and the workflow we're recommending is to keep the number of versions in the environment to a minimum, and also maintain a single version across all Dynamo environments whenever possible. And the reason for this is to help ensure that all users can run the graphs found in the library. Workarounds and methodologies are consistent for versions. Development of scripts is simplified to a common version and methodology, and changes can be rolled out across the office with less required testing. When selecting a Dynamo version to use, it's recommended to utilize the most recent version possible for your primary use. Since Dynamo Studio and Dynamo Core are both able to stand alone, the usual limiting factor for using the latest and greatest version of Dynamo is usually tied to the version of Revit being used. So, before any Dynamo deployment, it's recommended to review what the most active version of Revit is in use, and then install the most recent version of Dynamo, which is compatible with that version of Revit. So, the most current compatible version of Revit for Dynamo for each Revit release can be found at the Revit connection, and you'll want to review this prior to selecting your Dynamo versions. At this point, I think the presentation should be handed over.
Thank you, Emily. Just a reminder here to the attendees, so this is recorded and we'll be sharing it via email in the EP Hub, and also you will receive an automated email from us as a follow-up with the link. Now to you, Reiko.